Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, March 8th, 2007. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week we talked to Ken Smith of the Boston Beer Company, whose Boysenberry Wheat is included in the Samuel Adams Long Shot 6-pack. Ken beat out other co-workers to be the Boston Beer Company's representative in the 6-pack, which celebrates home brewing. Well, first off, a little self-promotion. If you can't get enough of my ramblings here, check out the most recent episode of the Brew Bubbas. Craig and Jerry were kind enough to interview me for their show, and I appreciate their time and kind words. I'm not used to having the tables turned on me. I'm used to asking the questions and not answering them myself, so that was an interesting exercise, and I hope it was at least interesting. The Brew Bubbas sent me some home brew, and we traded. I sent them some of mine, and one of their homebrews that they sent was their wheat wine, and I'm looking forward to trying that one out, along with other interesting brews in their collection. I hope mine are as interesting to them as those I'm sure will be to me. Also, Basic Brewing Video this week features a terrific tour of New Belgium Brewery in Fort Collins, Colorado. Many thanks to Chris McCombs and all the other New Belgium folks there who were so nice to us when we were out there in September. You may remember last time that we got an email from Gianluca in Los Angeles who had been recently diagnosed with diabetes. Gianluca was looking for input from other homebrewers who had found themselves in a similar situation. Well, since then, Gianluca writes that he talked to his doctor and they've worked out a solution where he can enjoy homebrew in moderation without a problem. Well, that's good news. Gianluca also sent me a couple of photos of Steve and me up on the 42-inch plasma TV. So, as if my head wasn't big enough. There it was on the big plasma TV. Tom from Overland Park, Kansas, wrote in with a response to Gianluca's situation. Tom says, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 4 years ago, and I had the same reaction. What about my homebrewing hobby and my 200-bottle wine collection? Well, I found that one can easily manage both diabetes and homebrewing. Tom says you correctly suggested that the brewer discuss the situation with his MD. This is critical. In my mind, the carbohydrates in a beer can easily be managed within the diabetic's overall intake, so that is not a problem. The problem for me, Tom says, was the calories. Weight control is a big problem for diabetics, and the beer can be a contributor to weight gain. My suggestion for the home brewer is to suck it up and get to their normal weight range, and then they may have a beer or two a couple of times a week without a problem. I've been brewing 4 to 6 batches per year for a while now, Tom says, and my diabetes is well under control. Well, that's good news. Again, if you have a question about your health, go to your doctor. I am not I don't even play one on TV. Joe from St. Paul, Minnesota writes, in regards to olive taste in beer, I had what I thought was a strong olive-like flavor in my third beer. By the way, a Vienna lager made as a partial mash with help from one of your podcasts. That's good. I think we've done an episode on both Vienna lager and partial mashing, so he has 2 choices there. When I tasted it, Joe says, after primary fermentation, I thought for sure that I had infected it, but I decided to put it into cold conditioning to see what would happen. In the meantime, I had a Sam Adams Boston lager that was a little bit on the warm side. After tasting that and my Vienna lager after 4 weeks of cold conditioning, I have come to the conclusion that warm beer and Hallertauer hops taste a bit like olives to me. 4 weeks of worrying over nothing, Joe says. So there's another suspect for the olive off-flavor phenomenon. And I wish I had a nickel for every time I worried about some green flavor I tasted in a beer at bottling time that eventually smoothed out over time. Patience is a valuable homebrewing skill. Michael Tonsmeyer heard me talking about kombucha, the fermented tea drink. You'll remember Mike from his small batch experiments on American hops and Belgian sugars. We've featured him in a couple of shows, very tasty beers. Mike says, was just listening to your most recent podcast and heard you talk about kombucha. I just started making it a few months ago after having a couple commercial versions while out in Denver in November. Surprisingly, the local Whole Foods had 4 different brands. Mike says the best version I had smelled like some of the wild beers from Russian River, and apparently, just like their beers, the mother, which is what you use to ferment the tea, the kombucha, the mother often contains Brettanomyces, Mike says. I recently started a blog to chronicle some of my fermentation projects and put up a short write-up of my kombucha method. I also threw up, hopefully not literally, I also threw up info on the sugar and hop experiments, so if anyone else happens to want the recipe/directions for those, feel free to send them in that direction. I will. Thanks, Mike. You can find a link to Michael Tonsmeyer's brewing log in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. And I'm going to have to look for that kombucha stuff. Now, I'm curious. Now, here's a letter that will probably spark a lively discussion, or at least I hope it will. Kim from Calgary, Alberta, Canada writes, I'd like someone in the hobby to sort out exactly the differences are between a batch sparge and a fly sparge and a fast fly sparge in terms of time, effort, grain efficiency, and hassle. Kim says a lot of people in the hobby are sold on batch sparging, saying it's faster, less work, same efficiency, no more tannin extraction, etc. I call BS, Kim says. If batch sparging was so great, wouldn't the commercial breweries use it? Number one, he says, I don't think it's much faster. I think some people overdo how slowly they fly sparge. By the time one fills the mash vessel, stirs it, lets it settle, circulates it a bit, and drains it, all done 2 or 3 times per batch, one could probably do a fly sparge. Number 2, I don't think it's less work. It takes more stirring and circulating than a fly sparge does, generally more attention than a fly sparge, which just involves running water. Number 3, if batch sparging is faster, wouldn't a fast fly sparge yield the same thing? And number 4, how can the mash be made as thin as it is with a batch sparge and not yield more tannin extraction? I'd love to see these questions answered in a side-by-side sparge session of a big mash split into 2 or 3 parts. Well, personally, I have to say, well, first of all, I'd love to see a side-by-side comparison as well, and that may be something that we eventually do over time. And I have to say that I enjoy batch sparging myself, and I get nearly the same efficiency as fly sparging. It's not quite as efficient, but nearly the same. And at the same time, I cut 30 to 45 minutes off my brew day, so that's a big plus for me. I don't think batch sparging is an option at all for commercial breweries because they're just not set up to do it. It would be impractical on such a large scale. To me, fly sparging is more work and more worry. For one thing, I don't have a pump myself, so to do it, I have to climb up on a stepladder and pour a large volume of 170-degree water into the bottling bucket that I use as my hot liquor tank. So, that's a little bit dangerous as well as inconvenient. Batch sparging is less worry for me personally because I'm not worrying about pulling tannins at the end of the sparge. Now, there are certain situations where it's easier for me to do a fly sparge. High-gravity batches, for example, when I've got a large volume of water already in the mash tun. So fly sparging is always an option, and I never completely rule it out, depending on the circumstances. But what do you think? I have a feeling that this is going to generate a lot of response. It seems to be a hot-button issue with brewers out there. So send your opinions on batch sparging versus fly sparging to james@basicbrewing.com or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from, and please don't forget to check your email address. I've gotten a couple emails bounce back recently. Speaking of soliciting opinions, I'm still collecting feedback on brewing software programs. I've got some good response, but I want more. I'm greedy. So let me know what you're using or what you have used and what you think of the brewing software that's out there. And I appreciate everybody who's written in so far. And eventually, a few weeks from now, we'll get together and read those and do a show. Well, let's get on to our interview for this week. This past year, the Boston Beer Company held a nationwide competition they called Long Shot. It was a search for 3 beers to be included in a special 6-pack celebrating homebrew. 2 of the slots were filled by homebrewers outside the company, and we spoke to them in September when we went to the GABF and covered the announcement there. The 3rd slot was filled by the winner of an internal competition held among Boston Beer Company employees. And the winner? Ken Smith with his Boysenberry Wheat. Well, Ken Smith, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Geez, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Now, you have the distinction, and I was trying to think, you may be one of only three people that I've talked to who have your face on a bottle of beer.
Yeah, isn't that something? It's a lot of fun.
Now, tell me about the Long Shot competition. We talked to the other 2 winners in Denver when they were announced, but at that time we were still voting on your end of things. So give us an overview of the competition.
That's right. My beer was actually consumer preference poll at the Great American Beer Festival, so you wouldn't have known that I won until everything was tallied. As far as Sam Adams is concerned, the Boston Beer Company, we've been doing an internal homebrewing competition for the last 6 years, I believe. And the whole purpose behind that was, our founder, Jim Cook, was involved in homebrewing himself, and in fact, the lager recipe that he works off of is his great-great-grandfather's recipe. And he kind of felt it was important that, people understand how beer is made and the process. And in fact, I'm in training, so I teach that kind of stuff to the sales organization. And we've always kind of run this competition internally so people could learn about that whole process. But this year they put a spin on it, and they, came out with the Long Shot competition, opened it up to brewers across the country, and said that they would, package the winner's beer, and it would be available in the marketplace. And they reserved 1 slot in that 6-pack, being that there would be 3 different beers in the 6-pack for a company employee, since we had been doing it internally for some time anyway. And I was fortunate enough to make a pretty decent beer this year, and I watched it get judged internally and move up the ladder, and then I was one of 3 finalists that made it to the Great American Beer Festival. And as I said, it was a consumer preference poll there where people came in and voted on the beer, and I was the one that won. So I got my face on the labels, and it's out, and all my family and friends are buying it, quite a bit of it.
I would imagine. Have you been asked for autographs yet on the bottles?
You know what? I haven't yet, but I've been autographing a few anyway, just to be like, look, you need to have my autograph as well.
You might as well. This is your 15 minutes of fame.
That's right. You know what? I'm milking it for everything it's worth. So people are getting kind of sick of me, I think.
So this is a competition that's been internal, and the employees haven't been a part of the Long Shot 6-pack in the past?
No, this is kind of the first year for the Long Shot 6-pack. I should say, actually, it was available. They did do Long Shot one other time. I believe it was 1996 or 7. And then it went away. And even when they did it back then, employees weren't a part of it. And then they decided that, look, that's where our roots as a company come from, and, there's a lot of homebrewers out there that are making great beers, and, I think Jim just felt that let's get that community involved, and if they make great beers and they're judged great, then we'll package them and put them out there.
So what does this do, or what kind of participation do you have, or did you have, for the contest within the company? Within the
company, I don't know the exact numbers, but I got to say it's around 90%. I believe that there were 262 people who brewed beer internally, and I throw that number out because I was the winner out of that bunch of people, which now I'm reasonably proud of. But I think pretty much everybody in the company brewed beer, and it's fun. I mean, everybody likes it. You do it at home. You learn about the process, and that's what we're all about. So we want people to understand it.
So were you a home brewer before you came to the company?
I wasn't, and really until they started this internal exercise and competition, that's really where I got started in it. And they send you the equipment and the recipes and some things like that. And it's one of those things that you really kind of get hooked on. Or that's been my experience, and that every year I think you sit down and you go, okay, what did I screw up last year? And most of the time I think it's sanitation. How can I make it better this year? And you make a beer, and then you kind of tweak your recipe, and you get a little bit more brave, and you start teabagging with some grains. I mean, I think most people here are probably extract brewing. There are a few that actually mash in, but not many. But you know how it is. You just get more and more into it, and every year you go out a little bit more on a limb.
So, you're in sales?
I am.
So, does knowing the process intimately yourself, does that help you be a better salesperson?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. It's if you're selling a product, and to understand the process behind how it's made, and with beer, it's such a fascinating process. You've got this organism that comes in and changes the malt that you've got in there and turns it into something different, and you watch it foam up in the carboy and everything, and it just makes, for me anyway, much more interested in the whole process, so that when you actually go to a brewery, you know what's going on, the whole, everything that's happening, and you're able to talk about that with retailers and customers, and then you start to learn more of the intricacies of how we make beer, particularly at Sam Adams, of the four vessel brewing decoction method and things like this, that unless you kind of went through this and started to study it and know it more, you might not have as much of interest. But it certainly makes you stronger when you're talking to the trade.
Now, you're sharing a six-pack with Don Oliver of California with his old ale called Little Beast.
Yep. And
Bruce Stott, who did a Dortmunder export, and he's from Massachusetts.
Yep.
It says a longtime resident of Connecticut, but currently residing in Massachusetts. And we talked to both of those guys at the event, the GABF event. And you were also competing head-to-head against two of your fellow employees. What were their beers?
The two employees, the one gal, Tina Petaway, made an IPA. And then the other gentleman, whose name escapes me right now, he had made a cherry-kissed stout. And both those beers were outstanding beers as well. And I think that what I might have had going for me is mine might be a little bit more consumer-friendly, if you will, a little bit more drinkable maybe. And when you're dealing with the public at large there, I think my beer was just a little easier to consume a bunch of them, and that's why I tended to get more votes. I like to kid myself that it's my face on the label that made people come back, but I don't know if that's the real reason.
Now, my buddies Andy and Brian and I sampled at the brunch, and we voted. And I believe that we all three voted for your beer. And, I'm not just sucking up to you. But they were all three good beers. But it seems like to me that yours was I don't think we even mentioned what you've brewed so far. It's a wheat with boysenberry.
That's correct.
And it seemed to me that they were very complementary, the wheat and the fruit. And the fruit was very fresh tasting, which is what got me. So before I want to get the details, we're homebrew geeks. I am, and the people who listen to the show mostly. So I want to get into the details of how you brewed the beer. But was what we were tasting at that event, was it your batch that you produced, or was it a small production batch that was produced by the company?
It was a small production batch that was produced by the company.
Did you see any remarkable differences between the produced batch and your batch?
When I had made it initially, I had used a Hefeweizen yeast, and it had just a little bit more of fruity, round character, which when they scaled it up in production, which is what is available, now, it has that fruity character to it. Although I will say that it had the initial in the bottle had some of that isolamyl acetate, a slight banana to it, and I don't get that out of the beer now. And the brewers have told me that they really don't know why. When they just upscaled the production all the way up, it kind of went away. So I don't know why that is, but that would be the only difference, and I believe it's pretty subtle.
And you brewed this at your house, right?
I did.
Now, take us step by step. Tell us about the ingredients, what went into it, and, the kind of step by step of how you brewed it at home.
Yeah, you know what? And I have met. There's another guy that was one of the 5 finalists that doesn't live too far from me. Greg Geiger, I think, is his name, and he actually invited me to come over and homebrew with him since then. And I was extraordinarily impressed with some of the homebrewers out there and the setups that they have. And this guy was mashing in with grain, and then he was loudering off, and he had a little sparging arm inside of it, and I was very very impressed. And I'm sorry to tell your listeners that I brewed completely from extract, and even the flavoring is extract. And what I did was I basically had some recipes I was messing around with from a Breeze malting book from the company itself, and there was a wheat ale, a Hefeweizen Bavarian style in there, and I thought, well, that would be great, and I don't know what kind of yeast to use, and so I went to my local homebrew shop, and I didn't even really know if you could buy the extract, a barley wheat combination, or if I had to mix the two, or any of that. So I really went to my homebrew shop, and I just asked the guy, and he said, well, hey, we sell the malt syrup here bulk. We just pour it right out of the deal. It's a wheat barley mixture, and here's the White Labs Hefeweizen yeast that we should use. And unfortunately, I don't have that number in front of me. I can't tell you which one it is. And at that point, I said, well, geez, do you have any flavoring? I think it'd be kind of fun to dump some flavoring in there. And he was like, well, look in the fridge there, and there's a whole bunch of flavoring. And I kind of looked through it, and I went, hey, boysenberry, that looks good. And I know people are looking for a much more complicated story than that, but that really, honestly, is the extent of it. I was all impulsed by almost everything, went home and, tried to do the best sanitation I could, made it in my kitchen. I did dump the flavoring in right before I bottled, and in fact, I had screwed up taking the last gravity measurement. I didn't do it before I dumped the syrup in, so I wasn't able to really tell what the alcohol level was going to be, and that kind of annoyed me. And then the only other thing which I find kind of odd is when I was pitching the yeast, I cultured the yeast first, and I was trying to do that in a separate little container, and it wouldn't come down in temperature, and so I had pulled an ice cube out of the refrigerator and put it in there, and I thought, oh, man, I've really screwed it up because now I've pulled this ice cube out. I don't know what the sanitation is there. So who knows? Maybe there was some strange bacteria that came out of the refrigerator freezer that made the beer what it was. That's
the magic. That's your house flavor. You
know what? And I thought I'd screwed it up.
Well, in a way, it's encouraging, especially to extract brewers out there, and I still brew with extract, and there's nothing wrong with that, that you can take a simple recipe and even mess up a little bit, and as long as you get the sanitation right, you're going to come up with a beer that's probably going to be pretty good.
Well, I impress myself. I mean, I think people are, a lot of people are telling me what a great job I did, and honest to God, I just think it was luck and sanitation, and everything turned out great, and that's what it is.
Now, what have been the beers that you've made in the past, and how have they come out?
Well, I've always thought that I made a pretty good beer, and I've told people this story that having done it for, I guess, 5 other times, I'd make a beer every year, and I'd taste it, and I'd go, oh, this is pretty good, and you'd give it to your neighbors and that kind of thing. And this year when I made this, and after I tasted it, after it had been in the bottle the requisite amount of time, and I tasted it, I was like, oh, my goodness, this really is a good beer. I mean, I could even tell that I had made something far and above what I had made previously. And so I was pleased with that. But this is the lightest style I had ever made. I remember making a stout once. I did attempt an IPA. I had a number of beers that I probably don't know what category they would have been in. I was pretty much winging it at the first couple of times I tried it, and was just trying to make a beer. So I don't know. I mean, they were all ales. I never attempted to make a lager, but that's about the extent of it.
Well, what kind of we didn't talk about your hopping in the wheat beer.
Oh yeah, I did use Hallertau Mittelfrüh, and I believe I hopped at the at the end of the boil. I may have I don't have the recipe in front of me. I may have thrown a little tiny bit at the beginning, and then I hopped a little bit more at the end. But it was all Hallertau.
Yeah, you wouldn't want an aggressively hopped wheat fruit beer. You might clash with the lightness of the beer if you get too much bitterness. So that makes sense. Yeah,
and I was going for kind of the citrus notes that you can get out of that Hallertau. A little bit of that piney citrus. I thought that would kind of go nice with a wheat, with a berry on it. I mean, that's really what I was kind of looking at.
So do you guys within the company, do you swap kind of homebrew horror stories or homebrew success stories about the time of the competition?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of stories that go around. In fact, I think that when we first started, the brewers used to taste everybody's beer. And they got to the point where there were, some people just making some really, interesting things that the brewers are like, oh, we don't even want to taste that. And so what they have changed the competition to be is that we work in kind of team building groups, and then within the group everybody submits their beer, and then that group tastes those beers and pushes the winners up to kind of the next category. So there's kind of a bracket system. And then the brewers really don't get involved until you get into the last 2 or 3 categories, so that by the time they get the beers, really all of the really bad things have been kind of filtered out, which makes sense.
Yeah, you can't. You don't want to risk ruining the palate of your brewers. That wouldn't be good.
Yeah, we don't want to screw that up. We need those guys.
You need to just feed them on the good stuff and Utopias and be nice to those guys.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, I think it was their idea to stop that tasting every beer. I think everybody gives it their best shot, but there is a learning curve.
Now, what's the distribution on the beer?
As far as I know, it's available in every single state, although there might be some states that, for some kind of legality reason or whatever, because the alcohol content I know of the strong ale is, I believe, 10.5, that it may not be available in, and I do not know the answer to that. I think, and I hate to quote figures, but I think that there were 30,000 cases made.
Wow.
Which is the number that I've been throwing around to my family and friends so that they think I'm even more important.
Well, it can't hurt. So what about next year? What are your plans for next year? Or do you get to repeat?
Well, I do get to. In fact, the competition is beginning now. The emails went out internally, and I know we have started the long shot competition publicly. You can get on the website, and you can see how to enter your beers and all that kind of stuff for the public. And then internally, our emails have gone out that if there's any supplies you're missing or whatever, ingredients, or that we can ship you from the company. And then I believe that, I think it's in March, we have a certain window of time that we all have to brew and then submit our beers. And, that's funny. I can, re-compete, and I've been trying to think about what kind of recipe. I had just read Randy Mosier's Radical Brewing, which I think is an outstanding book.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember making a lot of notes in the back about, I can do this and this and this, but I had not really sat down and figured out what I'm going to do yet.
Well, it should be fun, I guess.
It always is, except if you talk to my wife, I think she might have a different opinion. The family tends to leave the house for the day because they won't much care for the smell. So
I saw the ads for the long shot competition. I saw a TV commercial the other night, and I think I saw your face on there. So you're on TVs, not only on bottles. So you guys got a really good response from homebrewers last year, right?
Yeah, I believe there was slightly over 1,500 entries from the community at large. And I would suspect that we probably may see even a better showing this year, just because I'm sure there were a lot of people that didn't know about it. And now that, as you said, there's the television commercial, and of course podcasts, and some of the other media that's on it. It's just a fun thing, and I would encourage anybody who's making any kind of homebrew. And as you said, don't discount the extract brewers, because I think I'm a good example of, you can make a decent beer. So if you're making beer out there, go for it. And I believe the guy that made the guy that is from Cape Cod, it could be the guy from California. I don't remember which one it is, but I think he had only been homebrewing for a year.
I don't remember. Bruce. We'll have to go back and listen to the interview with Bruce Stott and Don Oliver.
Yeah, well, maybe it was Don Oliver.
Maybe, yeah, I think you're right, because Bruce made the Dortmunder export, and I think he seemed a little more seasoned than Don. I don't know. Of course, I'm probably insulting them both. I don't know.
Well, you're right. I think Bruce was. I think he teaches some of this stuff, and I think Don Oliver was the one that had not. I don't know if it's a year or not, but I think that he because we've been emailing back and forth a little bit, and I think he's somewhat new to the hobby.
Yeah, I think Bruce was I think he was the one that we talked to that was kind of a stickler for the old styles, in brewing within the style guidelines.
Right.
So, and you kind of didn't do that. Which
is I was just thinking that to myself as you said that.
Well, it's good that both camps are represented in there. We have the more artistic, may I say, reckless approach, and then the calculated style approach as well, and both of them work. So there you go.
Well, as I said, I would encourage people to enter their beers, because heck, you just might have it brewed and packaged and sold across the country, and you get your face on the label. I mean, how cool is that?
And where can they find out more about the competition?
I would go to the website, Sam Adams, the Sam Adams website. It's samadams.com. Yeah, Samuel Adams. Be sure. I don't think Sam Adams works. I think they have to type in Samuel Adams. And then I believe there's a long shot link, and they can just click on it, and it gives all the specifics on what they need to do, how they need to do it, and they can take it from there.
Well, and I look forward to. I think I've been promised a 6-pack. So
now, is that a 6-pack of just my beer or not?
No. Well, so you're not compiling your own 6-packs, are you? You're not buying like 3 6-packs and then kicking the others out and then handing out your own, are you?
No, because actually my face is on the 6-pack as well. So
there you go.
We're taking it all. And the other beers are great. I mean, it's a very eclectic, as you know, having talked to the other two guys and mentioning their beers. There's the variety of the 3 beers is there's something for everybody there. I mean, you'll find something you like in one of those 3 beers.
Well, I'm looking forward to sampling them again.
Great.
Well, congratulations, Ken.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your taking time out.
Have a good day.
Well, thanks again to Ken, and congratulations once more. You can find a link to the Long Shot competition in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. And if you enter and win, be sure to mention you heard it here when you give your acceptance speech in Denver. Well, next week we head to Kansas City, Missouri to talk to Stephen Powles of Boulevard Brewing Company. Stephen is the head brewer there, and Boulevard is coming up with some very interesting offerings. We'll have a taste and a look behind the scenes to see what makes up these tasty brews. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. And I appreciate all the kind comments that I've been getting lately, and well, since the show started, basically. And while you're on our site, you can check out our online shop, where you can find great pricing on our DVDs and a combo deal to save you even more. In our first DVD, Basic Brewing Introduction to Extract Home Brewing, we walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing, stepping into all grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort, and we show you both fly sparging and batch sparging in an unbiased comparison. And well, we don't compare them, we just show you how to do both. You can make up your own mind. You can see a listing of fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online. And thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are the P3 International Kilowatt Electricity Usage Monitor and, are you ready? The Ethical Slut, a guide to infinite sexual possibilities. So there you go. And lots of beer books. So people are sticking to the topic, but you don't have to. You can, have fun. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, we can't see who bought what, so no worries. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we'll get a little tiny chunk of that. And we appreciate your support. Well, that's all. Until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson, who also did our logo. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.